Envelope was gone. I had tucked it into the back of my desk drawer, wrapped in a rubber band, safe like treasure. My college fund, $60,000, saved by my grandfather since I was a baby. A promise he made to me when he held me for the first time. She'll never have to crawl the way I did. But when I opened the drawer that morning, the space was empty. My chest went cold. I stormed into the kitchen, heart pounding. Mom sat at the table scrolling through her phone, coffee steaming in front of her. Dad leaned back in his chair, the sports section unfolded like a shield. "Where's my college fund?" My voice cracked halfway through the question. They didn't flinch. Mom sipped her coffee. "We used it." I blinked. "You used it? For what?" Dad folded his paper with agonizing calm. "Your sister's wedding. Do you know how expensive venues are? Dresses? Catering? You'll understand one day, when you have a family." The room tilted. "That was my money. Grandpa saved it for me." "Stop being selfish," Mom snapped. "Your sister deserves her day. You can work, can't you? You're living under our roof. Rent doesn't pay itself." The words slammed into me harder than my father's gaze. Rent. For my own bedroom. On top of 2 part-time jobs. And suddenly, it clicked. The extra shifts, the exhaustion, the way my paychecks disappeared into household expenses. They weren't helping me survive. They were using me to bankroll my sister's fairy tale while draining the future I was promised. My hands trembled against the countertop. "So, you expect me to pay rent, work 2 jobs, and pretend you didn't just steal my life out from under me?" Mom's lips curved into a thin smile. "It's called being part of a family. Sacrifice. You'll thank us one day." Something inside me split, quiet, sharp, final. I grabbed my jacket, my phone, and walked out the door. The sun hit my face like a spotlight, and for the first time, I wasn't just their daughter. I was a storm gathering. Because if they thought silence was my only option, they'd forgotten one thing. Grandpa was still alive. And he was only 1 call away. The phone felt heavier than usual in my hand. My thumb hovered over the number I knew by heart, Grandpa's. But I didn't call. Not yet. Not while my anger still burned like wildfire. Instead, I walked. Past the neatly trimmed hedges of our neighborhood, past the shiny cars lining the driveways, past everything that screamed picture-perfect suburbia. None of it felt real anymore. I ended up at the diner near campus, the one with sticky red booths and a jukebox that only half worked. I sat in the corner, staring at the condensation sliding down a glass of water I didn't order. 2 jobs. Rent. No savings. And now no future. That's what my parents had left me. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and kind hands, stopped by. "You okay, honey?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I smiled weakly and muttered, "Just tired." Her gaze lingered a moment longer than comfort allowed. She knew the look of someone carrying too much. By the time I made it back home, the house was alive with wedding chaos. My sister twirled in her gown while Mom fussed over the hem. Dad filmed on his phone, beaming like he'd won the lottery. Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them noticed the way I stood there, a ghost in my own house. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. My sister's laughter drifted down the hall, light and carefree, like it cost nothing. Like it hadn't been bought with my future. I thought about all the years Grandpa had worked double shifts at the factory, how he'd driven a beat-up pickup until it gave out, how he'd tucked away every dollar for me. Because he believed I deserved more. And my parents had treated his sacrifice like confetti at a party. That's when the decision hardened inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about truth. About pulling the mask off the perfect family act they paraded to neighbors, friends, and anyone willing to believe the lie. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Grandpa's name, pressed call. His voice crackled through the speaker, warm and steady as always. "Pumpkin? You don't usually call this late. Everything okay?" The lump in my throat almost stopped me. Almost. "No, Grandpa," I whispered. "Everything's not okay. And I need to tell you what they've done." There's a silence on the line, heavier than any words I'd spoken. Grandpa didn't interrupt. He let me pour it all out, the missing envelope, the wedding, the rent, the exhaustion. By the time I finished, my voice was raw. When I finally stopped, all I heard was his breathing.
Slow. Steady.
Then his voice, low and controlled. They took the fund? Yes. My throat ached. 60,000. Every cent you saved. Another silence. I imagined him sitting in his recliner, jaw tightening, hand gripping the armrest the way he used to when the evening news made him angry. Pumpkin, he said at last, that money wasn't theirs to touch. It was yours. I gave it to you. For your future. His words trembled with restrained fury. I bit my lip until it hurt. They said it was family sacrifice. For my sister's wedding. Family sacrifice? He barked out a bitter laugh. Funny how sacrifice always seems to mean you giving up something for them. I closed my eyes.
He was right. It had always been that way.
Then his voice shifted, calm but sharp, the way it used to be when he gave instructions on fixing something in the garage. Listen carefully. I want you to write everything down.
Dates.
Conversations. Every detail. Then meet me tomorrow morning at the diner. Don't tell them you're meeting me. Grandpa, what are you going to do? You'll see. The next morning, the diner felt different. Maybe it was the way the morning light poured through the blinds, or maybe it was the steel in Grandpa's eyes when I slid into the booth across from him. He was already there, a folder open in front of him, papers neatly stacked. His old fountain pen rested between his fingers. I handed him the notes I'd scribbled. He read them carefully, lips pressed into a thin line. When he was done, he closed the folder and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Fire. Pumpkin, he said quietly. They think they can bury the truth. But I built my life on making sure people like them don't get away with lies. They want to parade your sister's wedding around like a fairy tale?
Fine.
Let's show them the cost of that fairy tale. For the first time since I opened that empty drawer, I felt something close to relief. Grandpa wasn't just listening. He was planning. And with him on my side, I knew one thing for certain. My parents' perfect world was about to crack wide open. Grandpa leaned back in the booth, his coffee untouched. They think they've played you, but they've really played themselves. You know why? I shook my head, still trying to catch up with his calm certainty. Because I never trusted your parents with that money in the first place, he said. I told the bank to list it as a custodial fund under your name. The only reason they had access was because you were under 18 when we set it up.
But now?
You're 21. Which means legally, that account was yours the moment you became an adult. My breath caught. So, what they did is theft, he finished, his voice razor-sharp. Not family sacrifice. Not a misunderstanding.
Theft.
The weight of that word sank into me.
Theft.
Suddenly, this wasn't just a betrayal I had to swallow. It was something that could be exposed, proven, even punished. Grandpa slid the folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, withdrawal slips, and a copy of the trust agreement. I requested these months ago. I had a feeling. I stared at him. You knew. He shook his head. I suspected. Your parents, they've always had a way of taking what isn't theirs. I hoped I was wrong. But seeing your face last night told me I wasn't. I swallowed hard, anger and relief colliding in my chest. So what do we do? Grandpa's eyes narrowed with a kind of quiet resolve. We don't yell. We don't threaten. We let them dig their own grave. Your sister's wedding is in 3 weeks, right? I nodded.
Good.
Then we let them build their castle of lies, brick by brick. And when every guest is watching, when every camera is rolling, he paused, his lips curling into something almost like a smile. We tear it down with the truth. The image was so sharp, so cinematic, that I couldn't help it. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. Grandpa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. They stole your future. Let's give them a memory they'll never escape. As we left the diner, the morning sun hit my face, warm and blinding. But inside me, something colder was settling. A clarity I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. And this time, I wasn't alone. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like living inside a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. Every corner of the house was draped in ribbons and flowers, deliveries stacking up by the hour, champagne cases, towering boxes of decorations, a custom cake so massive it needed its own van. And through it all, my parents beamed like royalty. They barely looked at me except to bark instructions. Pick up the dry cleaning. Run to the caterer. Don't forget to Venmo your share of the utilities. Utilities. As if I wasn't already covering my own survival with 2 jobs. But this time, I didn't argue. I wrote everything down. Receipts, overheard conversations, even the way Mom bragged on the phone about how generous Grandpa had been to fund the whole wedding. My anger was a live wire under my skin, but Grandpa's words echoed. Don't yell. Don't threaten. Let them bury themselves. So I bit my tongue. And I waited. The night before the wedding, I found myself in my childhood bedroom, the one they still charged me rent for, staring at the pale pink walls I once thought were safe. My suitcase sat packed in the corner. Not because I was running away, but because I already knew I wouldn't be coming back here once it was over. Grandpa called. You ready? I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I think so. Don't think, he said firmly. Be sure. Tomorrow, you're not the broken girl they see. Tomorrow, you stand taller than them all. You'll have truth in your hands, and that's heavier than any bouquet or champagne glass. I closed my eyes, breathing in his words.
Truth.
The next morning, the venue glittered with perfection. White tents stretched across the lawn, chandeliers swayed in the summer breeze, and guests arrived in sleek black cars. My sister floated down the aisle in a gown that looked like it had been stitched from clouds. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. And then the reception began, a whirlwind of toasts, dancing, and endless praise for the selfless parents who had given their daughter her dream wedding. Every word felt like a needle stabbing deeper into my chest. But I kept my smile. I kept my silence. Because Grandpa was right. The bigger the illusion, the sweeter the collapse. And when the microphone was passed my way, I knew the collapse would finally begin. The microphone felt heavier than it should. I could hear my pulse in my ears as I stood, my champagne glass in hand. Guests leaned in, expecting some sweet sibling toast. My sister's smile glittered like her sequin dress, but I saw the smug curl at the edges. My parents sat proud at the head table, basking in applause they hadn't earned. I cleared my throat. First, congratulations to my sister. She looks beautiful tonight. Scattered claps. Cameras rose, recording. And thank you to my parents, I added, my voice smooth, rehearsed, for giving her this fairy tale wedding. Really? It must have taken a lot of sacrifice. Mom's eyes glinted with warning. Dad shifted in his chair. I could feel their stares stabbing me, but I kept my gaze steady on the crowd. You know, I said slowly, this wedding wasn't just a gift of love. It was a gift of misused trust. Because while my sister was walking toward her dream, I was walking to 2 jobs. Paying rent to my own parents. Living paycheck to paycheck. Wondering why my college dreams had to die. A murmur rippled through the tables. But now I know why. I continued, reaching into my clutch. My hands didn't shake. Grandpa's words anchored me. I pulled out the folder he'd given me, crisp papers neatly clipped. Because my college fund, all $60,000 of it, was stolen. By the very people clapping at this table tonight. Gasps cut through the air. My sister froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Mom's smile evaporated. Dad's fists clenched against the linen. I laid the papers on the podium. Bank statements. Withdrawal slips. A trust agreement with my name on it. Everything you need to see how this fairy tale was paid for. The silence was suffocating. Then came the whispers, sharp and cutting. Someone in the back muttered, "Unbelievable." My sister stammered, "You're ruining my wedding." "No," I interrupted, locking eyes with her. My voice didn't waver. "You ruined my future. I'm just telling the truth." The crowd wasn't looking at her anymore. They were looking at them, my parents, faces pale, masks slipping. And in that moment, the first crack split through their carefully built illusion. I stepped back, handed the mic to the stunned DJ, and sipped my champagne. The taste was sharp, almost bitter. But it was the taste of power returning. The music didn't come back on right away. The band shifted awkwardly, the violinist lowering her bow. A few guests coughed into their napkins, others whispered too loudly to hide. I saw one uncle pull out his phone, snapping photos of the documents I'd left on the podium. My sister stood, the lace of her gown trembling as much as her hands. "She's lying," she cried, her voice pitching into hysteria. "She's jealous and bitter and—" "Check the dates," I said calmly, pointing at the folder. The withdrawals started 2 months before I graduated high school, right when I needed that fund for college. My grandfather, seated near the front, rose slowly, cane in hand. His presence was like a thunderclap. "I set that money aside for her," he announced, his voice carrying across the tent. "I trusted her parents to protect it, and now I see what they did instead." All heads swung toward Mom and Dad. Mom tried to speak, some half-formed excuse about family priorities, but the venom in the crowd was already coiling. One bridesmaid whispered too loudly, "They made her pay rent." Another gasped, "While funding the circus?" Dad slammed his fist against the table, the silverware clattering. "Enough. This is my family's business, not yours." But that was the final nail. Because family business doesn't hold up in a room full of witnesses with phones recording. Family business doesn't stop Grandpa from calling his lawyer, who I noticed quietly slipped out of the tent with the papers in hand. My sister's new in-laws exchanged horrified glances, whispers crackling between them like static. Her brand-new husband's mother stood, face tight. "If this is true," she hissed at my parents, "you deceived us all. You paraded your wealth while stealing from your own child." I almost pitied my sister, her perfect day dissolving around her, but then I remembered the smug laugh she gave me when I was drowning in bills. So I stood straighter. I didn't want this to come out tonight. But when someone steals your future, when your own parents profit off your pain, the truth has to find air eventually. The tent was no longer filled with applause. It was filled with judgment, with shame so thick it clung like smoke. And for the first time in years, it wasn't on me. It was all on them. By the time the cake was rolled out, the wedding had unraveled into whispers and stares sharp enough to slice through silk. My parents sat stiff, pale, their glory crumbling in real time. My sister clung to her bouquet like it might shield her from judgment, but the spotlight refused to leave them. Grandpa didn't wait. He pulled me aside, his hand firm on my shoulder. "The trust is legally binding," he said. "What they did is theft. I'll handle the lawyer. You focus on reclaiming your life." I nodded, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Within weeks, the fallout was everywhere. The lawyer froze my parents' accounts pending investigation. Their picture-perfect social circle, the neighbors they bragged to, the church committee they lorded over, turned cold. My sister's in-laws demanded explanations they couldn't give, their disgust echoing louder than any applause had that night. I didn't need revenge delivered with fire. I watched as silence did the work. Invitations stopped arriving in their mailbox. Friends stopped answering their calls. And when the case moved forward, when the restitution papers came, their proud signatures had no choice but to bend in ink. The $60,000 was restored, not as a gift, not as an allowance, but as rightfully mine. I opened a new account in my name only, and for the first time, I could breathe without counting bills in my head. Mom called, of course, dozens of times. Her voicemails were a carousel of tones: rage, tears, begging, then silence. I didn't answer. Dad showed up once at my apartment, fists balled like always, but this time the landlord threatened to call the cops, and he walked away without a word. As for my sister, she sent a single text: "You ruined my wedding." I stared at it, then laughed, not cruelly, but in disbelief. Because the truth was, I hadn't ruined anything. I had only spoken. The ruin was built into the lies they stacked on my back. What happens when silence is louder than revenge? You learn you don't need to scream. You just need to let the truth breathe. I walked across campus the day I re-enrolled, sun warming my face. Students brushed past me, carrying books, talking about classes. I wasn't behind anymore. I was right where I was supposed to be. And as the doors of the lecture hall opened before me, I whispered to myself the only closure I needed. It's mine again.